Hello, Malty. Mummified Machiavellian Marxists. And that's from a malt mention from Schmock van Foozel. And it's introducing Ralphie Review 879 Extras, in which I'm going to introduce a single malt with non-age statement, just to remind you that I do buy them. I don't review them because it's like there's missing information. I've got to ask yourself, what am I actually paying for here? Because I'm not paying for the age of the malt, because there's no age statement. But some of them are pretty damn good. Laphroaig Lower, it's a sherried Laphroaig. It's got no age statement, it's a good whisky. But you feel as if that denial of information lets the producers add quite a few extra pounds on top of what they're asking. Because they're basically, you're relying on their integrity. And I'm not comfortable with that. I'm far happier to have that. You see, with the disclosure of an age statement, you're getting respect from distillers. But I do understand why they bring out their non-age statement, because the majority of blends are non-age statement. But this one is Glen Scotia Victoriana. It's got a lot going for it, although it doesn't have an age statement. What I will tell you about it is that it's 51.5% and unchill filtered. And that's basically it. It states it's a classic Campbeltown malt and finished in the finest deep charred oak casks. In fact, it says twice in the front label that it's unchill filtered. But they don't give us an age statement. So I'm going to take a guess, with my experience, at what age it is. And I'm going to briefly talk about how you separate younger whiskies from older whiskies when the producers refuse to tell you. First of all, gently roll the liquor round the inside of the glass. Hold it up to the light and examine the coat line. The coat line is where the wet bit meets the dry bit, and you'll see beads appear, like a string of pearls in a necklace. In this instance, they're sort of, I would call them medium-sized. They're hanging for about 4 to 5 seconds, and then they're dropping on what's called medium legs. And the legs are the little lines of the beaded liquor sliding down the inside of the glass. Now, if you get tiny little pearls that drop very rapidly, that is a sign of young whisky that hasn't spent much time in a cask. If it hangs about as a thick line with fatter beads which fall more slowly on broader legs, that is a sign of an older whisky that's been in a cask for longer. So that's one of your first clues. Nose it. How much cask influence can you smell off the liquor? If it is sharp and pungent and spirity, that is a sign that it's a younger whisky. But it's a bit more complex than that, because it's a sign that's a younger whisky that spent a short time in a cask, or a younger whisky which has spent a far longer time in a less effective cask, a fatigued cask, a non-maturing cask. Because a cask can age a whisky, but it doesn't necessarily mature it. Because if the cask is fatigued, it's been filled 3, maybe 4 times before, the energy's gone out the cask. And the only way you can spot that is when you're looking and smelling at the whisky and noticing as much what's not there That's what is there. Sometimes it's very difficult to figure it out. But it comes with experience. I'm getting that complexity, these leather notes and the slight tobacco notes of an older sherry cask. Probably an older sherry butt. But I'm also getting the younger nose in here, which is giving a richer delivery of the signature and the identity of Glen Scotia single malt, which is one of the finest in Scotland, by the way. Always was a favourite historically with the blenders. So you're getting the fresh fruit notes of a younger whisky, but you're getting the cask influence coming in at an early stage. See, they're both together immediately. That's another clue. That what they've done is they've taken younger whisky and then they've put in 1 or 2 casks into their batch of older whisky just to lift it up beyond its years. One reason they would do that is when they're searching through the warehouse and they find a fine old sherry cask lurking at the back that hasn't been disturbed for many years, because bigger casks are harder to move in a warehouse. They require more people to move it. They require a forklift truck if the truck can get access. You see, with small casks, 1 or 2 people can handle them and move them and roll them and stack them and tip them up and put them in end relatively easily. But not with a big 600 litre butt. You can't do that. And generally, that's the sherry style. It's the sherry casks are the big ones. So it's lingering at the back of the warehouse and someone points out to the management, by the way, see that cask? We've just checked it and it's at 35% volume. We've had big evaporational losses and the managers go, damn! We were hoping to bottle that as some fancy 25 or 30 year old single malt, but it's below the legal minimum. So do we have another cask that we can that's strong enough in volume to take it from 35 back over 40%? And even once we've done that, is it still going to be flavoursome and substantial, and are people going to be prepared to pay a lot of money for it? And frankly, sometimes that's not the case. So I'm giving you a bit of insider knowledge here, just to give you perspective. So they take this fine old cask and they say, you know, it's got age, but it's not got a lot else. I tell you what, if we put that into younger whisky, say some 15-year-old whisky, it's going to make it smell and taste a lot older. And we can charge a bit more for it, but tell you what, we won't charge too much. We won't take the piss out of it. And I think that's what they've done here with Victoriana. It's one of the best of the standard range, and I tell you what, malt mates, you're getting a good bang for your buck in the British Isles if you're to buy it. Because one of the advantages of not having an age statement is they can't sell the whisky in the age statement. Do you see where I'm coming from? You've got to take it and trust. It's like Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Well, that's the best, isn't it? Because it doesn't have an age statement. So it's the most expensive, and therefore it must have the oldest, the finest, the rarest whiskies in it. Maybe not, to be honest. Maybe it's just the grooming of the consumer that's been taking place, as all big brands do. It's not been a good year for them, by the way, for the big blended brands. With pubs shut, bars shut, hotels shut, weddings not taking place, funerals not taking place above the most simple and practical form, with no big parties afterwards, with airports closed down. This has had a huge impact on the sale of blended whisky. But for those of us who buy online, and thank goodness for online, it didn't arrive a moment too soon, to be honest. We've been able to go out and discover and source far more variety of single malts than we've previously had access to. And when we go out there to find out about them, when we go out to see them, when we go out to spot them, we need to know about them. We need to know the backstory, and therefore I am giving you an opinion backstory on this particular single malt, which happens to be a very commendable, high rating single malt in my opinion. And I recommend it. And I recommend everything that Glen Scotia are doing at the moment, particularly if they stick to non-chill filtering, natural colour, and bottling at higher strength. And perhaps that is one reason why their 25-year-old single malt recently won the International Wines and Spirits Competition Best Single Malt in the World. Well done, Glen Scotia. I'm going to toast to you. You've earned it. I tell you what, it wasn't that long ago that visiting Glen Scotia was virtually impossible. You'd have to phone ahead. There was very few staff there. My goodness, they were doing the best they could with the resources they had. But the place needed major investment, particularly in casks. And the stills needed a good clean. And it was off the radar. And people didn't bother about Glen Scotia because they were too busy heading to Springbank. But now Springbank is getting harder and harder to buy. It's getting harder and harder to find now. We've got to spread our wings. We've got to adapt with the morphing environment out there. And Glen Scotia is definitely a worthy competitor to Springbank, both in the same location, same style of whisky essentially. And I've been hearing things about peated Glen Scotia, very interesting things indeed. Time will tell. But there's a wonderful, rich fruitcake smokiness going on in here. It's such a fantastic old school character dram. This is the sort of bottle that I would buy another 3 of and put them in the stash in case the price just goes up and up and up and up, because tell you what, malt mates, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, and to be forearmed is to be prepared. But it's a delicious whisky, absolutely. Ralphie recommended. And I would conclude by saying that when you have these odd whiskies, it can work really well. Because what I'm tasting here is some younger, fresher whiskey and some older, smokier, leathery, tobacco-y whiskey. And they've been beautifully blended together. I can assure you of that. And the result is fantastic, actually. It really is. It's slightly reserved in the development. You get this lush barley sugar arrival from the younger, fresher single malt. And then you get this smoky, resinous sherry in the shorter development, because the intensity of the younger malt is kind of driving through and pushing away the older whisky into the latter part of the development, and then both occupy the finish. And the finish is just crispy, tannic, fresh, delicious, slightly savoury, slightly umami, deliciously so. It's really such a shame that the rules do not allow distiller to disclose on the label the proportion and age of their single malt constructions. It has been tried and it's been knocked back, and even the Irish distillers, some Irish independent bottlers, have been getting into trouble about it, which I think is fundamentally wrong. And it's an opportunity for a world whisky distiller out with the British Isles to jump on it, make it a feature, run with it, and take full advantage of it. I'm Ralphie. This is my extras done and dusted, and a very tasty extras it was too. Any conclusion? I would conclude by saying that I understand why non-age statements are out there, because it provides flexibility. But unfortunately, from my perspective, it gives all the flexibility to the producers when they withhold that information, and we have to take them on trust as regards their pricing. Because you could also have a non-age statement whisky in which younger whisky is just put into, say for example, a distillery bottles some 40-year-old single malt. Now, what are you going to do with a cask, an empty cask? You're going to roll it out into the backyard and put it in fire? Turn it into landfill or sell it to the local joiner to be turned into planting tubs? I don't think so. I really don't think so. Because you've got to smell that cask of 40-year-old single malt. It's going to be magnificent. So in fact, you're using a really old cask that's been emptied and its contents bottled, and you're putting younger whisky in it for a cask finish. But it's its own single malt in-house cask finish. Right? Don't hear so much about them, do you? But they do exist. Happens all the time. Distillers, producers at warehouses, they don't just discard casks unless they need to. So if you've got a 40-year-old cask that's been on the go for 40 years and it just smells magnificent, and you get it straight back from the bottling plant where it's been off to for bottling, so you get that cask, empty cask, back as fresh as a daisy, plugged up, totally intact. Right, get some younger whisky, fill up that cask. The effect is magnificent. The effect is marvellous, but they can't use the younger. They could use the under the younger age statement, but then people would buy it and say, "See this 10-year-old whisky that went into a 40-year-old cask for 1 year, so it's 11-year-old whisky. Oh my goodness, this is absolutely so fantastic. I'm going to buy half a dozen bottles." But then they go back to rebuy that particular brand again a year later, and that particular batch is all gone. They're saying, "Oh, I'm a bit disappointed. It's now smelling and tasting like the actual age on the label." See, this is another reason, in fairness to the distillers, why sometimes they bring out non-age statement whiskies. But I'll leave it at that now. Sharing the knowledge, sharing the journey. Thanks for being malt mates. I'm Ralphie from the Bothy. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.